Welcome back to another episode of Kings of Columbus here on the podcast feed. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. College football is a changin', but you know what, Bill? Do you at times get fatigued by the amount of attention that off-field things in college football get?
Yeah, I do. I think part of that is maybe just my more natural inclination to what's happening on the field. Like that's the stuff I like the most. It's not to say that what happens off of it is not important. It clearly is. We're seeing the landscape of college football change, in real time here. But I'm kind of always of the mind of like, we can yell about it. It's not going to change it. So let's deal with it and like kind of move forward and talk about the things that are more fun. And that's kind of how I approach it. But as a journalist, maybe I shouldn't approach it that way. There are times that we need to talk about those kind of things, but it's just been nonstop for like, I don't know. I feel like 2 years now that I'm just like, okay, whatever. Expansion's happening. Okay. I'll see Oregon in a couple of years.
And how it affects the football and how it affects recruiting, right? Because recruiting affects the football. So I like discussions about it, whether it's NIL or the transfer portal or realignment or expansion or TV contracts, when it's within a context of, okay, well, does this make it easier or more difficult for Ohio State to win a national championship? Does it make their schedule for the 12 games that fans get to watch worse or better? Does it make their recruiting more difficult or more likely to succeed? That's not usually what the conversation is. So we're not talking about that here. We're talking about Marv, because Marv is football. Marv is football personified. Marvin Harrison Jr., MHJ, Philly Marvin, like a cousin of Philly Billy. We're going to break him down on this edition of Kings of Columbus. He talked a lot at Big Ten Media Days. Ryan Day has sort of talked about him, and we want to talk about what kind of season he might have, how Ohio State might use him. And I think we want to start, Bill, with where he's going to be on the field, because there's a way that you use a receiver, and a big, tall, physical, technically sound receiver like him. And I think we have a picture in our mind of like, well, I don't know, he's probably like an X, right? He's over there. He's one-on-one. That's not what it's going to be. What has he said? What has Ryan Day intimated? What do you think is going to happen in terms of where Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to line up this year and how they're going to use him?
I think the stuff with him in the slot is real. He was like almost exclusively in the slot in the spring, and I think that was just a function of trying to get him comfortable there. I don't think that's what it's going to look like in the fall, because the thing with Marv is you can't keep him in one spot. I think that is both the difficulty of having a player like that, but also kind of the beauty of it is you have to move him around, but he's capable of really lining up anywhere and being successful. So I think that his frequency of slot snaps will increase. And he talked about at Big Ten Media Days. You were asking him about this stuff. Like he was, I don't know. We're not able to look up the percentage of times that he was lined up to the boundary, but it was a lot. Most of the time, probably close to all of the time. We know that he was outside almost 90% of the time. So he felt like he was in the boundary a lot, which is the short side of the field. He wants to see if he can move around and play more on the wide side of the field, play more in the slot, motion a little more, basically anything that Ohio State can do to ensure that he's just not always stagnant, stationary, and putting himself in a position to get like double covered, which I think we'll get into in a little bit here. But I think maybe people should get used to the idea of not always seeing Marvin as that sort of isolated backside of the formation receiver, and more as a guy who is able to move around different spots in the formation. And as a byproduct of that, I think other guys will be moving too, because, that means Emeka Egbuka probably has to play outside a little more. But I think that's better in the long run for both of them, and certainly better for Marv this season, as teams are really keying on him.
According to PFF, his snaps last year, out wide 364, in the slot 58. And as you said, that's not a breakdown of what side of the field you were on when you were wide. Like, we don't have that breakdown. Can we do a little football 101? Because there are times when some of the most dedicated, educated, loyal listeners to podcasts like this say, hey, I love football, but I'm a little, and maybe one of those people is me. And when we talk about boundary and field, often when you talk about the Ohio State offense and any offense, you hear about an X receiver and a Z receiver, and then that slot receiver, which might be called an H, which might be called, I don't know, like a J, maybe a B. I don't know what a Y sometimes. All right, a Y or an H. I mean, I guess the Y is the offset tight end. I don't know. Yeah. See, I'm already cut this part out, Berm. So here's the thing. Tell us the basics of that. Boundary, field, X, Z specifically, and then we know the slot, how it fits to the personnel of Ohio State, and how maybe their responsibilities are different, what they can do are different, and how a defense might react differently to where a receiver is.
So I think this has changed a bit over the course of my time covering Ohio State, because if you go back to, I think maybe the prototypes that I would use to explain them are Michael Thomas and Devin Smith. So Michael Thomas is the X, the bigger bodied receiver, more of like a possession kind of guy, most often kind of isolated by himself on a single side of the formation. And the Z is more of the speedier down the field, maybe in terms of physical build, maybe a little bit smaller than the guy who's playing the X. Not typically isolated, although he certainly can be. And I think that's mostly how Michael Thomas and Devin Smith functioned. And it felt like for a time, Ohio State was like recruiting to those specific skill sets. Now I feel like Brian Hartline just wants guys who can do everything. And there's exceptions to that. Like Jackson Smith and Jigba is probably more of a natural slot guy than anything else. On this most recent recruiting class, like Brandon Ennis is probably that too. But a guy like Emeka Ibuka, a guy like Marvin Harrison, Garrett Wilson, maybe to a lesser extent, Chris Olave. I think these are the kind of guys that can play all three positions, or all three positions, X, Z, and the slot. So, and I think Marvin is that too, but Marvin has most frequently been used, I think, to this point as that X, as that bigger bodied possession guy by himself, go win a one-on-one matchup, as opposed to a guy that you're just going to send down the field full speed and chuck him 50-yard go balls all the time. They don't really have a guy who just like is specialized in that way in the offense, or at least they didn't last year. I think a guy like Jaden Ballard can maybe be that for the offense this year if you want like a person who fits that prototype. But those are the ideas: bigger body, possession, little smaller, pure straight line speed kind of deal. That's my shorthand for it. It's probably more sophisticated than that, but that's how I would explain it.
So in this offense, right, we would think Marv is the X, Emeka is more like the slot, and Julian Fleming is more like the Z, that deep ball threat, right? Mm-hmm. Back in the day, like in 2020, Chris Olave is the X, Jamison Williams is the deep ball threat, the Z, and Garrett Wilson's the slot that year, right? That's what we're kind of thinking about. Yep. Then when Jackson Smith and Jigba works in 21, we're thinking about Chris Olave as the X, Garrett Wilson outside as the Z. We made a big deal back then about Garrett moving outside, and Jackson Smith and Jigba as the slot. Am I saying that right?
Flip Chris and Garrett. Garrett was the X. Jackson.
Garrett was the X.
Yeah, and okay. Chris was more. That gets to the point of it's become a bit muddied with Brian Hartline. And
that X is right in the NFL is more thought of as like that's like your number one receiver. That's a guy by himself on a side of the formation. That's your go-to guy. And then I'm not a coach. Ryan Day was joking around at practice on Thursday. He walked by and said, "Hey, coach." He's like, "I'm going to call you coach now." And I was like, please, that is the last thing that anybody needs. But if you're hanging safeties on people, right? If you more often, because if you have three receivers in the game and you have two sides of the formation, one side of the formation is going to have one receiver, the other side of the formation is going to have two. So you can hang a safety over the side of the formation that has two guys there and really think like, okay, maybe on this route, we'll make sure the safety goes more with this guy or with this guy in that area. And then sometimes maybe the other safety on the other side is just with the X. It's almost like a double team. Sometimes you're playing center field. There's not a safety there. But it is the X, the boundary, right? The shorter side of the field, it can be more limiting, right? Because the sideline can be like another defender almost. Yeah. So when Marv's talking about, it's like, okay, especially if a defense is out to stop him, Marv's on that side of the field. If you just put a safety there, it's 2-on-1, and he doesn't have as much room to maneuver. And does it make it easier for a defense to say, we're going to try to take this guy away? We're going to dedicate two people to Marvin Harrison Jr. on this side of the field, and we'll let everybody else play 9 on 10 and take our chances. Is that if you just leave him in that spot, is that how it could go down?
Yes, that's how it would work in my mind, and maybe there are more sophisticated football minds listening to this who would tell us otherwise. But that makes sense, right? You, as a defense, you use the limited space as your friend, and I think that I mean, it didn't really put a cap on Marvin. He was incredibly productive last year. So how limiting is it for a guy like him? Maybe it's not all that limiting, but I think the idea makes sense that it's almost like having a third defender there against Marv. He can't. If he's lined up to the boundary and the boundary is on his left, like he can't go that way. So he can only go inside or he can go vertical. And if you have two defenders there, that increases your chances of trying to slow him down. I think that's sound logic. And it also, I think, gets to the thing that Marvin said in the spring. And we were asking him, like, hey, where do you think you can improve? And he was talking a lot about like improvement on the margins, and maybe that's not going to be so obvious to us. But the one thing he did say that I think is a little more tangible is improving yards after the catch. That's pretty difficult when that sideline is there sort of impeding your progress and your ability to do that. So moving him to the slot, giving him a two-way go, moving him to the field, just giving him more space to work with. That's the kind of thing that I think will unlock more yards after the catch for him. It's like, he wasn't bad at it last year, but if you're looking at his stats and like the one thing that kind of sticks out is lesser than it is that number a little bit. So yeah, it's both a weapon for the defense to try to guard him, but if you flip it, it's a weapon for the offense to get him in more space and give him more ways to go.
So moving him around does accomplish two things. One is what you want to do, and one is what the defense then can't do. So let's talk about the defensive part of that first, right? If you know where he's going to be, and most teams don't do this, they don't have a corner follow a guy around, right? That, I mean, as Marv said last year, it was funny. Marvin was at Big Ten Media Days was getting asked about Kalen King at Penn State, who's probably the best corner in the Big Ten this year. He was excellent last year. And you know how it is. People know this at Big Ten Media Days. It's like, I cover this team. I'm going to go ask every other player in the conference about the guy I cover, which is just good reporting, right? Yeah. So somebody was trying to ask Marv about Kalen King. It's like, hey, I'll ask the best receiver in the league about the best corner in the league. And he was like, yeah, I don't know. Joey Porter Jr. covered me all the time last year, which was the matchup that we saw, which Marv won, which might have lowered Joey Porter Jr.'s draft status. But that was just, and you could do that. It's not about Joey Porter Jr. following Marvin, but it's about if he's the boundary receiver and that's the boundary corner, that's just the matchup you're going to wind up with a lot of the time. So if he's moving around, the defense then can't anticipate and assume, even in game prep during the week, of how they're going to deal with Marvin Harrison Jr. because they don't know where he's going to be. Even if they know the plays Ohio State's going to run, Ohio State might run a play against Michigan State where Marv's at the X. And then when they play Penn State, maybe they'll run the same play, but Marvin's at the slot and Mecca's outside of the X, right? Like that's the kind of thing of, if we're talking about moving him around the formation, it prevents the defense from getting as much of a plan on how to deal with him.
Yeah, that's the idea. And Ohio State too is really good, I think, under Ryan Day of say there's a play that Marvin, and this is maybe this is more simple than that I give it credit for, but if Marvin runs one play where he's lined up in the slot at the snap, and then later on in that game, you run the same play, but instead of him being lined up in the slot pre-snap, they will bring him outside and do like a little short motion, and sort of he's on the move as the ball is being snapped, and he's still running the same play, but it's dressed up a little differently. They're really good at that kind of stuff. Running the same plays from different looks is like Ryan Day's bread and butter. But I don't know that they always utilized Marv that way. They've been excellent, I think, about doing it with the guys who line up a little closer to the football, guys like Jackson Smith and Jigba Emeka Ibuka. And like, why wouldn't you want to tap into that with a guy like Marv? So I think you do invite by playing a guy in the slot. I think it is easier to put more bodies on him. And we saw that in the spring game a little bit when Marv, I think I had it written down. Marv played 12 snaps in the spring game. 9 of them he was lined up in the slot, and probably on half of those 9 he ended up getting bracketed by like a linebacker and a safety. Now you take Marv versus any linebacker in the country any day of the week, but 2 bodies is 2 bodies. It's hard to beat. So I think you have to be a little bit careful of that. I guess there's the thought that if you do that and he gets that attention, then you're opening things up for everybody else. And Marv has a lot of gravity to him, so I think you do want to do that at times. But if you're doing it too much, I think you then sort of put a little bit of a cap on what Marvin can do, because you don't want to put him in situations where he's seeing multiple bodies all the time. But yeah, the idea of, he's on the boundary one play, he's on the field the next, he's in the slot the play after that. You can travel a corner with him if you want to, but I think for many defenses in college football, and the ones that Ohio State is going to play, you are then taking them out of their comfort zone simply by moving Marvin around, because they're going to be doing something out of the ordinary to try to contend with that on a snap-to-snap basis.
So if you're moving him around, X, Z, and slot, you are doing that to the defense. But by the way, when you do that, you also need other receivers who are able to move around too. It's like, oh, okay. Well, you can't move Marvin, have him stand. You can't do the three-legged race, Marvin and Emeka standing next to each other and running the same route. If Marv moves, that means Emeka's got to move. Well, guess what? Emeka can move. Or if Marv moves, then maybe Julian Fleming has to move. Or maybe this is a play where the three receivers on the field are Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, and Carnell Tate, right?
Yeah.
You want to do a little Carnell Tate tangent? I know you got a Carnell Tate tangent in you, but let's talk about the pieces around Marvin, how they might work. And I want to make something very clear here. Emeka Egbuka is not a piece that moves around Marvin Harrison Jr. He is not a moon around planet Marv. I am not mooning Emeka Egbuka. I am not making him a moon. He is his own planet, because he might be the second best receiver in college football. So that we're just talking Marv, and we're going to talk Emeka a little bit more later, but I am not at all implying that everything Emeka Egbuka does is to complement Marvin Harrison Jr., because that dude's a 1. That dude's going to be like the 17th pick in the draft a year from now. So I want to lay that out there. But what do you think of the pieces? Do they have with Emeka, with Julian Fleming, with Jaden Ballard, with Xavier Johnson, with Carnell Tate, with Brandon Ennis? I don't know. Do they have other guys who can do other things that allows Marv to be versatile and flexible?
Yeah, I think they do. And I think that's why, I guess over the course of last season, like toward the end, Marvin was seeing more attention, and he kind of talked about that at Big Ten Media Days. But I think the reason why it didn't happen more frequently is because of how good Ohio State was at the other spots. And I think there actually is, I don't know how prevalent of a thought this is within the Ohio State fan base, but I have heard it more than once, that like Emeka without Marv is maybe not as good as we make him out to be. I don't know that I agree with that. I think maybe sometimes guys just don't have great games or super productive games. I agree with you that they're both number 1 receivers, and have not similar gravity to them, but like Emeka is a guy you need to be paying attention to, because if you don't, he's going to burn you. And the fact that both of them can play inside outside, I think fairly comfortably, only ups that even more. I don't know about like Julian Fleming's ability to move around a lot. I think he's probably mostly an outside guy. But Carnell Tate, I think, fits the bill of a guy who can move around. Brandon Ennis, maybe to a lesser extent because he's a little smaller. Jaden Ballard is probably more specific to the outside of the formation. But there's enough there that I think if you just go into a game and saying, like, we're going to take away Marv, then Kyle McCord or Devin Brown is going to throw 4 touchdown passes to Emeka Egbuka. So I think that is a luxury that Ohio State has that, there are other teams that have more than one good wide receiver, but I don't think it's to this level. I don't know if we've seen it quite to this level since LSU in 2019, when they had Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. So I think this is that. Like, you can plan it. You can plan to try to take him away, but I just don't think it's a winning proposition, which is why you have to hope that you have a Kalen King or a Will Johnson, or the kid Ben Morrison at Notre Dame is also a really good corner. They're going to see a couple good corners this year. I think if you're those teams, you just sort of play your best on Ohio State's best and hope you survive. Otherwise, I don't think you can live in a world where you're diverting all your resources to Marvin Harrison Jr. and then leaving yourself exposed against Emeka Egbuka or Julian Fleming or whoever else is out there.
I was talking to somebody the other day about how good Notre Dame's corners are. So there's just a lot of things about that Notre Dame Ohio State matchup that are very interesting, but we have time to get to that. Continuing on the Carnell Tate tangent, a CT tangent. Oh, Carnell Tate's last name is the same first name as Tate Martell.
Mm-hmm.
Is that why you like Carnell Tate so much?
It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt.
That would be a podcast. Now we probably could do that through NIL, right? Get Carnell Tate and Tate Martell to be on a podcast with you.
Yeah. And have you ever had those? I think I've seen them in Target. They're like Tate's Bake Shop cookies. They're like crispy chocolate chip cookies. They're very good. Yeah, so that can be the sponsor.
Do you think possibly Tate Martell is making those cookies?
Maybe. He seems like pretty interested in the NIL or the what's the
crypto? Is he a crypto guy?
No, what are those things called? That's like it's like computer art and people pay for it, like it's the Mona Lisa.
Oh yeah, NFTs.
NFTs. Yeah. He's into that stuff.
All right, if we buy an NFT, we can get Tate on the show. So Carnell Tate. So let's make an assumption for now that Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, in some order, which we'll get into later, will be Ohio State's 2 leading receivers by yardage this year. Who's third? Julian Fleming, Cade Stover, Travion Henderson out of the backfield, Xavier Johnson, Mr. Football, or Carnell Tate?
Oh man, I'm looking up the gap between Julian Fleming and Cade Stover last year is not as wide as I thought it was. Julian Fleming had 533, Cade Stover had 406. I would say that Julian Fleming still ends up the third leading receiver, but I think it is a fairly tight contest between he and Cade Stover and Carnell Tate.
Because the thing you have to leave open for Carnell Tate is like Carnell Tate smoking some dudes in the second half of the Youngstown State game and the Rutgers game and some other games. Like, oh, did you see Carnell Tate had 7 catches for 143 yards in just the second half against Rutgers? And then also maybe working in as a real part of the offense. So I thought maybe you'd want to say Carnell Tate, but you held off.
Well, okay. Yeah, I don't want to, because I think I said on the daily on Thursday that I think Carnell might be like a 25 catch kind of guy, but like Julian Fleming had like 36. So I still think Julian Fleming is like a little closer to 40 receptions next year than Carnell Tate is. Which is
just, I mean, it's something to keep in mind. It is very hard to evaluate first-year Ohio State receivers in this day and age. And again, Marvin Harrison Jr. made like a speech about why coming to Ohio State as a receiver and not playing in year 1 is awesome, which was, it was like, hi, I'm Marvin Harrison Jr. My dad's in the Hall of Fame. And when I came to Ohio State, I didn't play at all. And it was awesome. And it's like, oh my, what better recruiting pitch could there be? So he loved that idea. So like the idea, like trying to figure out what, because Jackson Smith and Jigba, it's like Jackson Smith and Jigba as a freshman had 1 toe tap catch in the back of the end zone. Well, he had like 6 catches. I think he didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Right. Because he had a whole roster of dudes ahead of him. So we don't know how that's going to go down, but it's also very possible as we think about moving parts here that Carnell Tate helps free up some other stuff, that there could be a look where with what we want to do here with Marvin and Emeka, it might make sense for the third receiver on the field to be Carnell Tate. Not 60 snaps a game, but maybe 10 snaps a game that matter, right? Is that kind of where your head's at a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. And it was hard to say whether or not that was like real in the spring because they had so many guys out. So Carnell was playing with the ones. But when we were out there on practice on the first day of practice on Thursday, Carnell was, I guess he would have been like the number 2 X, if you want to call it that, behind Marvin. So like he's not buried on the depth chart, and he has already jumped in front of guys who have been in the program longer than him, seemingly. So yeah, I think that's out there for him.
So, hey, in this play, we want to play Marv in the slot. Who's the X? Maybe it's Carnell Tate.
Mm-hmm.
Second part of this is what Marvin is able to do in different spots on the field. And you talked about those 2-way routes from the slot, which is what made Jackson Smith and Jigba so dangerous, because he had an ability on those 2-way routes. So it's like you're in the slot and you're going to run up a little bit, and then you can break inside or you can break outside, depending on the leverage of the defense. Where's the help, the body position of the guy who might be on you. And you have to have a smart quarterback who's connected with you that is reading it the same way, that you can see off the break, off the line. Okay, this is what this looks like. It's in the route for the receiver to make a decision, but the quarterback has to make the same decision. And every now and then, right, when you see a pick or a weird throw, it's like, what was that? It's like, it was that, right? It's like everybody did the right thing, but in the moment, in making the read on the 2-way route, the quarterback read it one way and the receiver read it the other. But at its best, it is a way for a guy in the slot to exploit a defense with more maneuverability I think it was maybe what Jackson did best in his record-breaking year. And that, given Marv some of that, sounds delicious.
Yeah, I think they like Jackson had a ton of option routes, I think, in his repertoire. And I don't know, maybe there is a better example of quarterback receiver being on the same page on those things than CJ Stroud and Jackson Smith and Jigba. I'd love to see it because I feel like they were never wrong. I feel like they were always in sync. And honestly, last year at times, I don't know that it always felt that way. I think it might have been the Iowa game where like CJ threw a ball over the middle of the field that should have been picked off, and it looked like Emeka like went the right way and CJ threw the ball the wrong way, or vice versa. Like they were not quite as in sync in some of those moments as CJ and Jackson Smith and Jigba were. So to your point, it can get you in a little bit of a bind if you're not careful, which is, not an insignificant thing when you're talking about a brand new starting quarterback for Ohio State this year, whoever it is. But I think like Marvin definitely has the football savvy and spatial awareness to be trusted with that kind of stuff. And they probably, if you ask Brian Hartline, there are probably option type routes, even if you're on the outside. And I know like the Penn State game last year, Marvin and CJ were like sight adjusting a lot of those slants because Joey Porter Jr. was playing off coverage. So that's a version of it, I guess. But on the fly, reading a safety, am I going left or right? Am I keeping on my line? Like that's hard to do. But Marvin, the son of a Hall of Famer with, all the body control in the world and the lateral quickness of a slot receiver with the physical attributes of an outside possession receiver, like I think he can do it. I think he might be okay in those spots.
And in talking about this Ohio State offense with people over the years, we discuss often, I think, especially in college football, the idea of a more veteran quarterback getting more of the offense. We're always very interested, like, can guys call audibles at the line of scrimmage on their own? Are they checking with the sideline? How much freedom do they have? And I find that to be always an interesting topic. I think a receiver can go through a similar part of the process. And even within those option routes, I've heard it sort of talked about sometimes that it's some of the idea of there might not even be a route. Mm-hmm. That your route is get open. And that the quarterback's job is to understand what the receiver is seeing and be on the same page with him. And it's like, what are you supposed to do here? It's like, there's nothing you're supposed to do. You're supposed to figure it out. And when you think about Jackson Smith and Jigba last year, and we know, I think we all agree, like there was a game plan. The way Ohio State talks about what they were going to do against Notre Dame with Jackson Smith and Jigba is similar to what Ohio State talked about what they were going to do with Ted Ginn Jr. against Florida in the national title game at the end of the 2006 season. It's like, you take that away. It's like, we built the whole offense around that. And now that's gone. I think there's a version, right? That's what we might be talking about. That this is the Ohio State offense, especially in a world where the receivers coach is very intimately involved in the play calling, potentially calling the plays, that you are building an offense around Marvin Harrison Jr. Mm-hmm. And you are building it not just around his skills, but his acumen and his experience. And then it's like, hey, the defense has a plan to stop you. But maybe that's not going to work because the defense can't know Ohio State's plan because there isn't a plan. Because the play is Marv, do your darn thing, and the quarterback's job is to be the dance partner. Now, that puts a lot on the quarterback, but if you can get that elevated, again, I think Ryan Day and this offense, they're very open, and they want that. And so that, I think, is part of the discussion of moving Marvin Harrison Jr. around. You got to give the guy the whole dance floor. And so if he's on half the formation, you want this guy to be able to let it rip and let loose and never be wrong because we trust you. You have immense skills, but you also have a tremendous understanding of the game. And your route on this play is get open, and your quarterback's job is figure out what he's going to do and throw the ball where he's going to wind up.
I think that's right. It reminds me of, and maybe this, I don't know if this will push us further along or not, but I know we wanted to talk about some other returning college football stars and compare them to Marv. Like the 2020 Alabama offense had dudes all over the place. Jalen Waddle, John Mechie, who was the running back who was very good. Najee Harris, Mac Jones, a quarterback kind of as the trigger man. But that offense with all that star power was like, it was Devontae Smith. It was, where is Devontae Smith? He is the engine that makes this whole thing go. And I think you have to treat Marvin similarly. And it's not to say that Ohio State didn't think about him along those lines last year. I'm sure that they did. Like, clearly he was the focal point of the offense. An offense that throws the ball a lot, he got the most targets. But there is an elevated version of that then that they didn't really get into last year. That I think something like what we saw with the utilization of Devontae Smith, the different spots in the formations, the motions, the bluff motions, the orbit motions, like the handing the ball off to him, that kind of stuff. Like, I think Marvin can do all of that. He's, they have other mouths to feed. I'm not saying you don't force the ball to Marvin on every play. And I think we've seen Ohio State in the past get a little bogged down by trying to force touches to certain players. So you have to tread a little lightly there, I think, too. But he's so good. Like, he is not just a 6'4" outside, go get a ball in a contested situation kind of receiver. I think there is so much more that they can unlock with him. But the number one way, or the first step in doing that, is, I like the way you put it, give him more of the dance floor to utilize. Give him the entire dance floor to utilize.
So there are some, I think, very good comparisons here. And one of the things I was sort of asking Marvin at Big Ten Media Days a lot about the idea of, like, what if they try to take you away?
Mm-hmm.
What if a defense says Marvin's not going to beat us? And so I was trying to look back, and I saw you nudged us. You're like, Doug, we're good with this topic. There's another topic coming. And you segued very nicely, but I sometimes I need to be nudged. It's okay. Most of the great receivers, because here's what happens sometimes. Sometimes you sneak up on the world. Jackson Smith and Jigba had more receiving yards than anybody in Big Ten history in a world where people thought he was Ohio State's third best receiver, going to be their third best receiver, their third leading receiver. And then he went bazonkers. So sometimes you can sneak up on the world and maybe they can't adjust to you in time to figure out how to stop you. So I was more intrigued by, what if you're great and then you come back? Like, Jamar Chase had like a good year going into 19, but he didn't have he went bazonkers in 19, and then he sat out in 2020. So we never saw college football truly try to adjust to Jamar Chase, right? I was curious about that. So I tried to look up some people. Devontae Smith's a really good one. I found a couple other ones. Here's one that I thought was maybe interesting. A.J. Brown, big-time NFL receiver now. Whenever someone mentions anything with the Eagles on this podcast, do you say go Birds or no?
I say it in my head. I don't always say it out loud, but I absolutely said go Birds in my head when you said A.J. Brown.
Okay, that's what I thought. Oh, and Devontae Smith.
And Devontae Smith, yeah.
Okay, go Birds. A.J. Brown at Ole Miss in 2017 had 75 catches on 96 targets. He averaged 100. He had 1,253 receiving yards. He averaged 16.7 yards per catch. He was targeted on 96 of their 413 throws that year. Okay, 96 of 413. So he's A.J. Brown. He comes back. His targets go from 96 to 115. His catches go from 75 to 84. His yardage goes from 1,253 to 1,307. He winds up with 115 of 417 targets. So same number of throws. He gets about 20 more targets the next year, and he's more productive. So everybody knew A.J. Brown was good. Elijah Moore, who also was a very good receiver at Ole Miss, is in the picture. He's not a one-man offense. Because sometimes if you're a one-man offense, like I had some David Bell stats at Purdue, and it's just like, I don't know. It was like when David Bell was the Big Ten receiver of the year, because Ohio State had Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. And everybody was like, David Bell, he's better. I was like, really? Is he better? Or is he just alone? Being alone doesn't mean you're better, which is, voters are very bad at that. Because it's like, oh, look at all these good players. I'll take that lonely guy. The draft tells you who is a top 15 pick, who is like a third round pick who's going to get passed by 6 guys in the Browns depth chart this year. Why do people love alone guys? People love loneliness. Look at this poor guy standing in a field by himself. He's playing 1-on-11. He got targeted 186 times. He must be the best.
Yeah, it's because if you focus on that guy, then it removes the need to contextualize anything.
It's not dissimilar from Ohio State getting in over Baylor and TCU. The idea of like, I can't choose, so I'll pick neither.
Yeah.
That's what people did. People were like, I can't pick between Jackson Smith and Jigba, Garrett Wilson, and Chris Olave, so none. And then you and I were an All-American committee screaming for Garrett Wilson. And what happened now? Ask Aaron Rodgers. Does Aaron Rodgers want David Bell or Garrett Wilson?
I think I gave Garrett I'm pretty sure I voted for Garrett in the Heisman Trophy voting that year.
Get him on the show. Get him on. Like, what do people think? Oh, who's what's best? Must be this Purdue guy. He's all by himself.
Yeah.
Okay. No offense to David Bell. He's just not Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave or Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Did you? I'm looking at this now on Pro Football Focus, and I guess I'm not entirely sure how much the trust stuff like from 2017 and 2016, because I feel like maybe like they have the cumulative stats, but some of the more like advanced stuff maybe is not totally accurate. So this could be wrong, but even if it's wrong, I still think it's if it's slightly off, I still think it's noteworthy. In 2016, they had AJ Brown as like purely an outside guy. And then in 2017, they have AJ Brown as like purely a slot guy. And then the 2018 season, when everybody knew who he was, it was like close to 50-50 slot outside.
Good comparison. I like that. And that's why it's one of those things. We evolve as people in covering this team. And I'm not sure I was ever more excited. What was I more excited about? When it was Garrett. Garrett was outside as a freshman. Then he was in the slot as a sophomore, and then he moved outside again as a junior. Mm-hmm. And one of those moves, I like jumped up in the press conference and was like, what? I was so excited. I guess, was it because it was moving to the slot?
Moving to the slot, yeah.
Yeah. It's like Garrett Wilson in the slot, because it felt like back then it was like slot was like, oh, it's like a little guy. Put it whatever. It's like, oh, no, we're going to take our best, most physically talented guy and put him in the slot. And my brain exploded. And now we're just like, yeah, no, Marv's in the slot sometimes. But that's the evolution of this. It's like that you're not pigeonholed. So the idea that Marvin Harrison's not pigeonholed, if AJ Brown back then wasn't pigeonholed, good for them. Good for them. Hollywood Brown at Oklahoma, 2017, 57 catches on 82 targets, 1,087 yards. 2018, now they know he's good, 75 catches on 103 targets, 1,318 yards. So like they didn't stop him. CeeDee Lamb at Oklahoma, 2018, 65 catches on 89 targets, 1156 for the yardage. 2019, 62 catches on 88 targets, 1325 on the yardage. He was with Hollywood Brown the one year. I think he might have had Mark Andrews with him another year. So he wasn't a by himself guy. Devontae Smith, the same thing. Devontae Smith goes from like really good in 19, really important. I think he has like 95 receiving yards per game to the Heisman winner. Now, the one thing about Devontae Smith's Heisman win, everybody knows, it's like he might even been the number 2 receiver on his own team. Jalen Waddle gets hurt. That does open it up. So Waddle was hurt, absolutely influenced Devontae Smith going crazy to a Heisman level. But the bottom line is, and college football exploded, so I didn't finish my stats research. Thanks a lot, college football. The point is this. I did not find a lot of examples of a dude who was awesome, came back, and his stats fell off a cliff. Mm-hmm. Not a guy of this quality. And when you go and research PFF and this kind of thing, I threw out air raid offenses because I don't know. And I threw out non-Power 5 things because this is not like a UTSA conversation. No offense. We're talking Power 5 schools that play balanced football. Nobody got stopped. And the reason that I wanted to have this part of the conversation and try to compare him to other recent stars is the Joey Bosa conversation. Because Joey Bosa is a great freshman. He's a freshman All-American in 2013. In 2014, he's one of the best defensive players in college football. He's an All-American. He helps lead a national championship drive. I think he has 13 and a half sacks in 14. Mm-hmm. And in 2015, he comes back. Everybody's taking screenshots of him getting triple teamed, and he has 5 sacks. And everybody's like, oh, I guess Tyquan Lewis is a superstar now. And it's like, okay, well, also maybe the other guy's getting triple teamed. No offense to Tyquan Lewis. But Tyquan's good. And I think Emeka's a step above. I don't want to make a Tyquan Lewis Emeka Ibuka comparison because I think there's more natural. Tyquan Lewis was the 64th pick in the draft. He was a second-round guy. He's an NFL guy. Not doubting him at all. But there's a gap between Joey Bosa and Tyquan Lewis. There's a gap, I think, between Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Ibuka. I don't think it's as big. Mm. But I was wondering if Marv might get Bosa'd. That is what my real, from a statistical standpoint, and in asking Marv about that, what if they try to shut you down? What's going to happen? And he said, if I take 2 defenders out of the play because they're worried about me, I've done my job. because I've opened things up for somebody else. So when we saw Joey Bosa with 3 guys on him, it wasn't usually 3, it was usually 2. He's done his job because now you have an edge advantage. The numbers are no longer equated, as Urban Meyer always said about everything. Is that is any kind of Bosa stat drop off on the table here? Or in a world like a receiver is different than a defensive end, they're going to scheme him open. Nobody should be worried about that.
I think it's more of that. I don't know that I'm worried about that. I think maybe that idea could put a cap on Marvin's ability to like threaten Jackson Smith and Jigba's single season reception and yards record. It's like 95 catches and like 1,600 yards. And Marvin had 77 catches and just about 1,300 yards last year. I am expecting similar statistical output from Marvin. I'm not worried about that. I think that the positions are pretty fundamentally different in your ability to scheme your way out of that, move a receiver around. Now, you can move a defensive end around, and I think Ohio State with Chase Young in 2019 did try to do that a little bit. Remember, there were plays where like Chase was like standing up over the center, and you could like almost see the center peeing his pants because he knew what he was going to have to do on that play, and like Chase just wrecked him and then sacked the quarterback. They didn't do a whole lot of that with Joey Bosa, if I can recall. So there are ways to scheme your way out of that scenario as well, but I think it is much easier to scheme your way out of it with a receiver. So he will see increased attention. He will see more bodies. It might keep him from being a guy who obliterates receiving records. But I don't think it makes his output all that different from what it was last year.
All right, so let's do that then. Let's talk about some of this, because a year ago, I thought Jackson Smith and Jigba might have 2,000 receiving yards. Mm-hmm. I really did. I was looking up that Nevada guy. It's like, oh, he might be like that Nevada guy. And then his body exploded, unfortunately. We never got to see it. But it was the idea of he did so much with 2 established guys around him, and he was going to be the guy with a connection with C.J. Stroud in the slot where Ohio State likes to throw the ball there. You look at the stats combined that Paris Campbell and KJ Hill put up out of the slot in 2018, and it's like there's a lot of natural inclination there. And I just, again, like you can find ways to get open most of the time. And so it sounded crazy, but I absolutely justified it in my head. In hindsight, would you have told me a year ago that that's crazy if I was on your podcast talking about Jackson Smith and Jigba and 2,000 yards?
No, because we didn't know what Marvin was going to become. We had an inkling that Marvin and Emeka were going to be good, but I think everybody looked at them as complementary pieces to the Jackson Smith and Jigba offense. And CJ had such a rapport with Jackson too that like 100 catches felt realistic. And if you have 100 catches in this offense, you're going to be close to 2,000 yards.
Okay, I feel better. So let's make some statistical predictions. We don't have to get hard and fast about this. We don't need an exact number. But within all the discussions that we just had, targets last year, according to PFF, Marvin Harrison Jr. was tied for 6th with 118. Xavier Hutchinson at Iowa State, which is a guy standing in a field by himself, 161. Charlie Jones at Purdue, a guy standing in a field by himself. I love Xavier Hutchinson, by the way. Charlie Jones, 154. A.T. Perry at Wake Forest, 129. Zay Flowers at Boston College, who everybody loved in the draft, 124. Jacob Cowing at Arizona, 122. That was part of a combo. And then Jalen McMillan at Washington and Marvin Harrison Jr., both 118. I think he should get more than that. Emeka was 13th last year with 106. 77 catches for Marv on 118 targets. How much higher than 118 targets should they creep, Bill? And we think, and again, when you say forcing it, we know you mean Braxton Miller, but this is not that.
Yep.
And they did that 2015 offense. My goodness, what a complete and utter failure across the board. Literally too much talent. They did not know what to do. I don't know what, like, you wound up in a world with the defending national champs where somehow They didn't get the ball to Ezekiel Elliott enough. They didn't get the ball to Michael Thomas enough. They didn't get the ball to Braxton Miller in the right way, and they messed up the quarterback situation all at once. How can all of those things be true? It's not like, well, at least we did this, but this guy had to suffer. Everybody suffered. Everything was wrong.
Yeah.
Can you get Marv more targets, more toward, and it's one of those things, like 118, I want more. What do I want? I want like 130, which is like one more per game.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Like, can they do that, or do you think that would start to feel like forcing it?
No, I think they can do it. I don't like 150 on the year seems high to me. Like that, if you told me they're going to have 150 targets to Marvin, then I would be like preemptively a little nervous about forcing it his way a little too much. But yeah, if you add another 2, well, I guess if you had another 2 per game, you're practically at 150 anyway. Yeah, but like 1 or 2 targets, more targets per game, I think is certainly on the table. And I also, this is a conversation about targets, but I would maybe sort of meld it with just like touches in general. And like they ran that reverse to Marvin against Indiana. That was awesome. I can't remember if he scored, but it was like a 26-yard reverse. And it was like, what was that? Like, where has that been all year? And then they didn't run it prior to that, and they didn't run it again after it. So I think some of that stuff is on the table. So if you're going to tell me that he's still like around 120 targets for the season, but they found a way to get the ball into his hands differently, like another dozen times throughout the year, then I think I'd be okay with that too. So I'm fairly comfortable with like the 120, 130 range. I don't know that it needs to get higher than that, but probably another 1 or 2 per game is fair.
Okay. I agree with that. I think, and it's one of the things, I think it should feel at times like they're forcing it. Like not all the time.
Yeah.
But, and Urban always talked about this a lot, of having a list of playmakers that you've got to get them the ball. But even Ryan Day the other day, in talking about the jobs of an offensive coordinator and a play caller, one of the things he said in there was like, get the ball to the guys, right? So, I mean, they can't settle. You can't settle with Marv. You should have whatever the number is. He has to make sure that he's involved to this extent each game. So let's talk about most receiving yards in a season in Big Ten history. His year last year was 19th in Big Ten history. Jackson, 1606 in 2021 is the Big Ten record. Lee Evans at Wisconsin, 1545. Charles Rogers at Michigan State, 1470. David Boston, Ohio State, 1435. Allen Robinson, Penn State, 1432. Terry Glenn, 1411 in 1995 at Ohio State. Those are the 6 guys over 1,400 yards in a single season in Big Ten history. So I just don't think a 2,000 receiving yard season, partly with a younger quarterback, partly what you've talked about, how much you think they might run the ball. This is still a balanced offense. 1606, breaking Jackson's record. Somewhat realistic, would be bonkers. Don't even think about it. Should be the goal. Like what, all right, not 2,000, but I don't know. I'd take 1,650. That sounds all right to me.
Yeah, I think it is realistic. I wrote a story a couple weeks ago about like records at Ohio State that are actually like within their realm of possibility this year, and Jackson's like single season records was the one that I felt was most attainable. And honestly, Emeka Egbuka's numbers were very similar to Marvin Harrison's last year. I don't think it's impossible that he ends up being the one that flirts with it more than Marvin. I think both of them are almost equally capable of it. But I think that if Marvin is going to give you both we can throw it to him over the top stuff, but then also we're going to work in some more yak opportunities by giving him maybe some shallower catch and run kind of things over the middle of the field. I think he can get to that 1606 number without having to get to the 95 receptions that Jackson also had that year. I think that Marvin might be able to get to that number at like 85 receptions. And you also have to take into account too, like whether or not they're going to play 15 games. Because if they would have played 15 games last year, Marvin might have broken the record already. So, I think it's definitely on the table. I don't, whether or not it's a goal of his, I'm not sure, or even if it should be. I think guys can get a little tripped up when they put stuff like that out there, but it's definitely out. Like it's, if I had to place a bet on it happening, I think I might.
You would place a bet on Marv breaking the record?
Yeah.
breaking the Big Ten record. Okay,
Yeah.
because I'm going to ask you to pick one here. More likely, Marv breaks the record or Emeka has more receiving yards than Marvin this year?
I think that's a good question because I actually don't think it's like an automatic Marv, but I think I would go with Marv. Marv breaks the record. I think is more likely.
And if Emeka Buka, if they're both healthy the whole year, and Emeka Buka does have more receiving yards than Marvin Harrison Jr., that is an indication of what? Two tremendously skilled players, an offense that didn't target Marv enough, the fact that maybe Emeka is still better after the catch than Marvin is. Like, what would that tell us something about how the Ohio State offense functioned and their chances of success? Or would it just be a statistical thing? And I don't know, if Emeka's at 15-10 and Marvin's at 14-40, who cares?
I think it would mostly be that. I guess it could tell us that maybe in the end they did not use Marvin in the slot as much as we thought they would. Like Emeka still got, because like Marvin was practically 90-10, or it was like 86-14 or something like that, outside inside, and Emeka was like 70-30 inside versus outside. And if he ends up with more receiving yards than Marv, then maybe that would tell me that it was more similar to last year than I would have guessed. But other than that, like I think whatever the numbers are, they're going to be pretty close. I'd be pretty surprised if by the end of the year we're not looking at a similar situation where their output is practically identical.
And how are you thinking about the quarterback play in all of this?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that too, because like I think I have been assuming all along that Kyle McCord is going to be the starting quarterback, and if any part of me had like a very strong thought that Devin Brown was going to be the starter quarterback, I almost might pull back a little bit on statistical projections for Marv, because in the way that Jackson was the security blanket for CJ, I think that Marv is that for Kyle, and especially if they're going to line him up in the slot closer to Kyle. So I think Kyle equals more opportunities for Marv than maybe Devin Brown would. Not like how much more. I don't think it's like Marvin gets 200 targets if it's Kyle and he gets 118 if it's Devin, but if with Devin, if the floor is what Marvin did last year, then with Kyle, it might be more like 140 targets.
Just because they'll be doing it Philly style.
Yeah.
If they're together, even though Kyle McCord's from South Jersey.
He is from South Jersey. Yeah. Do you know that Marvin's dad went to my high school?
You're Marv Sr. and Rasheed Wallace, right?
No. Rasheed Wallace went to Simon Gratz. Marv Sr. went to my. There's a few NBA guys that went to my high school. I don't know who the most famous is. Maybe like I don't know. Like remember like Malik Waynes played at Villanova. He went to my high school. I was actually in school with him. But Marv Sr. is obviously older than me. But there was a day when I was in school where the Eagles played the Colts, I think, that weekend. So Marv Sr. like came by and they like gave him some kind of award. And I was just like walking to class, walking in between classes through the hallways, and like Marvin Harrison just walked by us, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
You are the what most famous person from your high school? Like 12th?
No.
Trying to get in top 10?
Can I tell you the most cocky thing I've ever said in my life? Is one time I turned to my brothers and asked, because we went to the grade school we went to was called St. Bernard's, or Bernard's, I guess we probably say it weird. But I turned to my brothers and I said, am I the most famous person to go to St. Bernard's? And we had like a legitimate conversation about it, because like I think if you base it like solely off Twitter followers, I might be. But like as soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, I can't believe I just said that.
Yeah.
But high school, no way.
I just put it in your Twitter bio now and dare someone to challenge it.
Yeah.
From someone from St. Bernard's to be like, oh, wait.
Yeah. Am I the most famous person from this small Catholic school in Northeast Philadelphia that had 90 people in my graduating class? Like that's some kind of impressive thing.
And it is one of those things. I'm sure there are like multiple people from your high school who are nurses and paramedics and firefighters and cops and doctors who have saved people's lives.
Right.
And it's like, but are they on a podcast?
They don't talk about the Bucks, I'll tell you that much.
So this is now our opportunity to debut on Kings of Columbus, something that I've been doing for a while in my previous stop, which is controlled nonsense, structured nonsense, because people like the nonsense. But sometimes people say, well, I got to be in the mood for it. Some people like it. Some people hate it. So we started doing this thing called What You Watching, What You Eating, What You Thinking, where we get to talk about TV and movies. We talk about food, and then we just talk about, life.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to start that here. So Bill Landis, what are you watching? What's on the old screen, either in your house or out in the world, that caught your attention lately?
Yes, I was thinking about this because I knew we were going to do it, and I got depressed by how little I've been watching lately. There's the list of things I want to watch is incredibly long. Whether or not I'll ever watch them, I have no idea. But I think this might fit the bill, and it is not traditional, I suppose. So I'm the kind of person who I don't watch horror movies. They terrify me. I don't like being jump scared. I don't mind gore so much, but I don't like being jump scared. So I don't seek out horror films. I don't go to the theater to watch them. I don't really watch them when they're on television, unless they're on AMC and I know they're going to edit out some stuff that might scare me. I go to Wikipedia a lot, or at least I used to go to Wikipedia a lot to read the plot summaries of horror movies because I find myself interested in the stories, but I don't want to sit there and be scared watching it. But a couple of years ago, I stumbled across this YouTube channel called Dead Meat. And it is basically a video form of that. They have the thing on Dead Meat called the kill count, where they go through all the classic horror movies, all the new ones, and they tally up the ways that people are killed in those movies, and then give away awards for best kill, worst kill. But in the process of doing that, you basically get to watch the movie truncate it down to 20 minutes. And some of the gore and stuff is in there, and key plot lines are in there, and there's actually interesting production stuff and behind the scene things that are in there, but it eliminates a lot of the jump scares, or if they're coming, they prepare you for it beforehand, so you know that it's coming.
Yeah.
So I watch that all the time, and I bring it up on this episode because they released their Scream 6 kill count on Friday, so I watched that on Friday morning. So now I felt like I've seen Scream 6, even though I didn't go to the theater to see it, and I will never actually watch the full movie.
So you don't want to be entertained by murder. You just want the cold, calculated forensic tally of murder.
I want the body count. Yeah.
Not within the structure of a story, not as part of a more contextual drama or something that's trying to elicit emotion. You're just give me a number. Is it 12? Is it 12? Oh, 17. Oh, interesting. And now let's watch the murder.
Yeah, but the good thing about the way that they do it on Dead Meat is it is still linear. It's okay, here's the beginning of the movie, and you get I'm actually surprised they get away with it because they basically give you the entire movie in sequence, but also the main focus is hey, watch out, this guy died. Wasn't that cool? Here's the replay. And then at the end they tally it up and then have cool graphics. It's really well done. It's a channel that has 5 million subscribers or something like that. They're really good at it.
Oh, I thought maybe you were going to say now that you've said their name in a podcast, they're probably going to get shut down.
No.
Dead Meat. So if you're interested in murder, but you're too scared by somebody saying boo, you're oh no, I love the gore. I mean, if someone cuts someone's intestines out with a knife, I'm there.
Yeah.
But if they're hiding behind a door right before they do it, then I want no part of it.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
If you're gonna cut my arms off, just be standing in my living room. Don't be behind the curtains. Oh, he's behind the curtains. Oh, wait, big knife. Oh, no problem. Yeah. Okay, exactly so you have not. So we have to be able to talk about things besides Oppenheimer and Barbie, but you have not yet seen Barbie. But this reminded me because there's a thing in Barbie that references another movie. There's a thing, I think it's a callback to 2001, A Space Odyssey. And as people may or may not know, my daughter is a sophomore in college and she's studying film and TV, and she's interested in this kind of thing. So she and I, we made a list of here, you need to see these movies just because they might be referenced in other situations, especially if you think you're going to be writing them or doing anything like that. And so do you have this? I feel like I have big, and I don't want sometimes you look, 100 movies that you should see before you die. And they're all French stuff from the 50s, oh, ho, ho, Montfaucon. It's I don't want to watch oh, ho, ho, Montfaucon. It's I just want to watch real, normal person movies that I probably should see to be a functioning member of American society. Oh, ho, ho, the cinematography. I don't care. That's not what I want. So I want a list of a normal person thing that makes sure you see this. Do you have that? I have it, and I have Deliverance queued up on Netflix. I've had it in my folder, I don't know, whatever you have there, for 8 months. And then every time I sit down, I'm okay, it's time. And I can't make myself watch it because I kind of know what it's about and it feels like I should watch it and it's a reference point and people know about it, but I'm not sure I'm going to be entertained by it. And then I just want to watch an old sitcom. But I feel like there are things. Now, I've seen 2001's A Space Odyssey, and I told my daughter we have to go watch it. But I have a bunch of those like that it's not fall, but it's still American movies from the probably not older than the 70s, from the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s that I think I should see. I haven't seen Shakespeare in Love yet. You know, like I don't know. Should I see Shakespeare in Love to be a functioning American adult? But I also kind of don't want to make myself do it. Do you have a list like that? And if you do, does it feel like homework?
I do have a list like that. It does feel like homework. I think, and I've knocked some of them out. I actually can't think of it. Like I remember, I'm a man who listens to a lot of podcasts done by white guys like in their 30s, and they talk about Heat all the time. I was like, I feel like I should watch Heat. So I watched Heat a couple years ago.
I watched Heat a month ago for the same reason.
But I have that list of things, and number one on that list is probably The Godfather. I've never seen The Godfather.
Oh,
yeah,
for real?
Yeah.
You've never? What's holding you back on The Godfather?
I don't like it's on TV all the time, but I don't want to watch it on TV.
No,
I'm not sure that it's available on streaming, and I actually like somewhere in my house might actually have it on DVD, but I also don't have a DVD player. So I don't have a way of watching that even if I wanted to. So I think it's just a matter of it being available for me to stream and then me like remembering that I haven't seen it.
Well, you know that like every movie in the world's like on Apple TV for $2.99. Right?
I did not know that. No.
Yeah, no. Do you have Apple TV?
Yeah.
I'll give you the $2.99. No. So I watched The Godfathers in college. I used to have a job where I would have to sit in the lobby of a dorm from 8 p.m. till 2 a.m. and make sure that people didn't come in and when they weren't supposed to come in. So I had a TV that had a VCR built into it. And I carried my TV because I worked not in my dorm. So I carried the TV with the built-in VCR from my dorm to the other dorm's lobby and then watched The Godfathers in the lobby while I was at work. And I made myself watch them in college, but you're in your 30s.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll rectify this. Now I feel better about my list because at least I watched the stinking Godfathers.
There are a lot of like, if you, can I pull this up now? Can I pull up like the IMDb top movies and see how many I've seen?
Yeah, no, I think let's just go 90 minutes on this.
Yeah,
number 16. Oh, Bill's seen it. Doug hasn't.
So like number one is Shawshank Redemption. Haven't seen it.
How the jails in Ohio? There's a billboard between Columbus and Cleveland that you've driven past 400. What do you watch? Do you just watch Eagles games replays? Like, what are you watching?
Yeah, I watch That Thing You Do over and over again.
So snappy. There are no songs in Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've seen most of the top 10 other than that.
I feel so much better about this topic.
Yeah.
Deliverance. Squeal Like a Pig. You haven't seen the guy. Okay.
Well, the good thing about this conversation is now that my phone has been listening to me, so now if I go on TikTok, I can just watch The Godfather.
Yeah, no, you can just go on Dead Meat and watch all the because I do think that people die in The Godfather. Yeah. Like, oh, there's a cannoli scene. Oh, I'm not scared anymore. Okay, I feel much better about that. Your list is worse than mine. Please get to work on that. But that's also a good thing to do with the baby. Like your baby just falls asleep and you're holding your baby and you watch a movie.
Watch The Godfather. Yeah.
And then your baby will have seen The Godfather at the same time you did. Okay, what are you eating? What you eating, Bill Landis?
I was going to talk about something else, but then on Friday for lunch, I went to this place that's over in Grandview. Here in Columbus, for anybody who's not from Columbus listening to this, it's called Marino's. I think it's called like Marino's Fried Fish or something like that. It's a place on Fifth Avenue in Grandview, and like they just do like fried fish. It's like fish and chips, fish sandwich. That's what I go for. And I got a fish sandwich, cheese, tartar sauce, the works. Like it's an elevated. It's like I don't go for the fillet of fish. It's like an elevated version of that. And I was just reminded, like it's a very solid sandwich. I like places that are like. They're local. They're a one-off. It's not super expensive, but they do like two things and they do them really well. And that is a place that does fried fish very well. And I also like it too because I don't know why this is the case. It's a small spot. So the guy at the register, the person bagging everything up is 2 feet to his right. and the person who's cooking everything is literally just on the other side of the counter behind him in this big open space. But every person who walks in and orders, he gets on this big microphone and shouts it into the microphone so everybody in the restaurant can hear what you ordered, instead of just turning into like, hey, this guy got a fish sandwich, or like turning around like fish sandwich, you got that? He just screams it and everyone in the restaurant could hear it. And I find it delightful, in addition to their food being very good.
That makes me want to do a live podcast there. Can you ask them about that?
Yeah.
When we get back there. So I could see you. Is there an alternate version of the Philly Billy life where that is you? You open a local place that specializes in two things, and that's what you're doing?
Yeah, and there's like, it'd be a weird combo, I suppose, but it'd be like, I want like a cheesesteak soft pretzel joint.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. You're fired. Please go do that. So, did you go to the state fair? Did you go to the Ohio State Fair?
I have not gone yet this year. We're recording this on Friday and we might go tonight.
Oh, I went on Thursday night. Got to go to the state fair every year. I was trying to look it up, like how good is the Ohio State Fair, which is one of those things. Sometimes you look for things on the internet. It's like, oh, how good's the Ohio State Fair? It's like, how would anyone know? Is there someone that's gone to 50 state fairs and has judged it thoroughly and fairly? So, but I've seen people say like the Ohio State Fair is really good. And so like you have to go to the Ohio State Fair. And we absolutely make it a point to go every year. And you get the fried fair stuff. So my daughter's favorite food is steak on a stick. So there's a place at this fair that has steak on it. It's just steak, literally on a stick. And she had 4 of them. And like one's supposed to be her meal, but she saves up all year. It's like her favorite meal is steak on a stick. I was like, I could make a steak on a stick. And she's like, no, you can't. And I actually probably can't. But so she ate the steak on a stick, but this fried stuff at the fair, you've got to get it. But I also feel like they're kind of out of ideas, right? So it's the, like every like fried Oreo, fried Snickers. My daughter had fried cookie dough, fried peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I had the deep fried Nutter Butters. Oh. So they were good. But I'm also kind of looking for the next evolution of the deep fried thing. I don't know what it would be. But I feel like it's a thing I've got to do once a year, is go to the state fair and eat a deep fried something. And I don't even know if it's about enjoyment. It's about like marking a year in your life. It's like, yeah, I ate a deep fried thing this year at the Ohio State Fair.
I saw something on one of the social media platforms, I can't remember, it was a deep fried Uncrustable. Would you go for that?
Oh, no, that'd probably be good. Yeah. I mean, anything that if it gets hot on the inside, it gets a little mushy. And then you have the outside like fried thing. Yeah. So, and I'll just continue into what I'm thinking is like, I just like being there. I feel like it connects me to Ohio because, and I like seeing lots of different kinds of people having fun with their families. And then sometimes you see a cow being born. So when we were there yesterday, there was a cow that was born that morning, but we've been there like with a cow that was born. I think we saw a cow being born one time. And then we just like to walk through the goats and the sheep. And I really like watching people be excited and people going on the rides at the fair and playing games at the fair and getting crazy food at the fair and seeing a cow at the fair. It's like 3 different things at once. That it's an amusement park and it's like a farm. And if you live in Ohio or if you live in a different state, I think every state has a state fair. Like you have to go to your state fair.
Yeah.
It connects you to your state. It reminds you of the people that are your neighbors that you live with. Maybe they don't live down the street. Maybe they don't live in the same town, but they live in the same state as you. They're part of the same experience that you are. And it is a great cross-section of people in Ohio. So I find it like grounding. I find it like exhilarating. I'm curious about everything. And it makes me grateful. It's like, it's easy because we live in Columbus and it's right down the road. But especially if you live in Columbus and like you're not making the state fair like a regular part of your summer, you're missing out, man. You got to go. Now it ends on Sunday. It's been going on. So if you're hearing this, you're like, oh, I got to go to the fair. It ends on Sunday, but put on your calendar for next year. So I don't know. And when you and I both grew up in Pennsylvania, I don't know that Pennsylvania has a state fair, but they had the farm show. Did you ever go to the farm show?
I've never gone to the farm show. I lived in Carlisle, which is not too far from Harrisburg, where the farm show is, but I never went there. And it was like a big thing at Penn State too, because Penn State's a big ag school. But no, I never made my way there. There was, though, like at the when I was a kid, there was definitely. I don't know if it was like the official state fair. I can't imagine it was, because it was in Philadelphia. Why would they put the state fair so far from everybody? But I'm pretty sure they called it the state fair, and it was at like Philadelphia Park, the horse racing track. So we went there a few times when I was a kid, but I don't have great memories of it. But the Ohio State Fair like is much different than that. Like, and the fact that it's like centrally located, it's easy, relatively easy for like every corner of the state to get to. I agree, it's pretty cool. I've lived there for like 8 years or 9 years, I guess. I think I've only been like 2 or 3 times, but it is worth going to for sure.
And Third Eye Blind was there this year. I missed him.
Yeah, it's funny. Like sometimes these like, and I don't know, maybe Third Eye Blind is only a big musical act to people who were my age and your age, and like kids who were your children's age, like who the heck is Third Eye Blind? But sometimes I'm surprised by like the names that you get at a state fair, musical acts. It's like, oh, okay.
Clint Black was there. I've seen Clint Black in concert, so missed him this time. But yeah, good shows. So go to the state fair. So Landis, what are you thinking about?
I mostly wanted your opinion on something, because I was reminded of something that like made me feel like made me wonder, like, am I a terrible person? So
let me ask Doug. I have a question about whether I'm a terrible person. Who could I possibly ask?
Yeah, it's not all that serious. But I was reminded of it because I listened to there's a very popular morning radio show in Philadelphia that's on Monday to Friday, 3 hours or 4 hours every morning. And I listen to the podcast version of that because it helps me feel like connected to back home. So anyway, they were talking about like the quickest you've ever seen someone get fired. Like, and people were like, oh, I saw a guy get fired after being on the job for like an hour. And I've never been fired. I got laid off one time. It was like part of budget cuts, but I have quit a couple jobs. And I want to know what you think of this. So when I was in college, this would have been in 2007. I guess I was a sophomore. Fall of 2007, I was a sophomore. And there was like a convenience store in the commons of the area where I lived, and I got a job there as like a cashier, and like went through the training. Like I was excited to have a job. And then my first day working was the day of game 1 of the NLCS, when the wild card series, when the Phillies were playing the Rockies, and it was the first time the Phillies had made the playoffs since 1993. And I was like, I'm not missing this game. So I called in. I tried to call in sick on my first day of work, and they're like, what are you doing? You can't call in sick. I was like, all right, well, I quit. And like, I made them go through the process of hiring me, background checks, all that stuff, all the paperwork, all the man hours it takes to hire somebody. And then basically just like didn't work there after they offered me the opportunity to work there. I feel like I was in the right for doing that, but I want to know what you think.
I think I agree with you. Circumstances forced your hand on that. And the older you get, the more you realize there are times in your life where you think, I'm more concerned with the opposite, right? Because when I was in high school in the summer from Pennsylvania, my friends and I drove to Toronto to watch a baseball series. And we were driving back from Toronto, and there was an accident on the highway, and the highway was blocked. And we briefly thought about like driving all around the one lake to come back around. And then we're like make a 900-mile detour. And we were like, no, let's not do that. So we got stuck in traffic, but then we were driving in the middle of the night, and we were all like falling asleep at the wheel, but we were like, we have to get back home for work. I worked at an amusement park. I was like, wow, how could a 19-year-old miss a day of work at an amusement park? Let's risk our lives and drive through the night at 5 o'clock in the morning. And we were like waking each other up and be like, you got to drive. I'm falling asleep. And we just should have pulled over at a hotel and been like, I'm going to miss work today. But in that moment, it felt like getting to your job was the most important thing in the world. And that's no way to live. Yeah. So you have to take things seriously. But you had a moment. This is a rare thing. Whenever you have a moment where I will remember this for the rest of my life versus a thing that you do every day that's just going to be part of the blur of your life. The thing you'll always remember has to win. It has to win. So that's what you chose there. Now, doesn't mean you should be a slacker your whole life, but that was an exception to the Philly Billy rule of how you live. And here you are, you remember it, and you would regret it if you didn't. So I'm with you.
I remember it mostly because the Phillies lost that game and then got swept. So that was the universe punishing me.
And then you're like, I wish I had a job.
I wish I was making money and wasn't a poor college student right now. But no, yeah, I think at that time of my life, it was an okay decision to make. It probably it wasn't the most responsible thing in the world to do, but like I don't feel like I made the wrong decision in hindsight. It does make me like this could take you down probably some roads where like stuff gets serious and people did things that were like truly kind of awful. But I am wondering now, like especially like Ohio State fans are so passionate. Like, what is the biggest thing you blew off for an Ohio State game? Like, I would love to know that.
Oh, I love topics like that. So I would like to do that topic both ways. What's the biggest thing you blew off to miss an Ohio State game? But I would also like to do what's the thing that you did and missed an Ohio State game that you felt like this was worth it. Like I love college football. I love the Buckeyes, but this mattered more because I am not on the side of how dare anyone schedule a wedding during football season, because guess what? You get married once. And if your friends get married or your family members getting married and you have to miss a football game, I just think you might be okay. But also the other side of that, right? The balance. We all got to find our balance in life, man. So I would be fascinated to do both sides of that, because don't you think the answers to both are awesome?
Yeah, I think they can be awesome, but then I also think there might be people like my marriage ended because I didn't want to miss the Ohio State Michigan game in 1998. So I don't know if I want to go down that route necessarily.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Again, it's like if your marriage ended but Ohio State won, you'd be like, well, that's okay.
Yeah, that's true.
But if your marriage ended and then they lost, it's like, what was that? Was that even worth it? Right. So we'll put that down. We'll mark that on the list for a future Kings of Columbus. For now, we'll end it there. Stuff's happening, man. Stuff's changing, but guess what? There's still football being played. So we want to have fun here. We want you to have fun. We want to talk about football. And yes, all the other things matter, of course. We talk about that too. But how good Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be, regardless of what's going on elsewhere in the world, that's something that we have to be able to talk about, and we will talk about on the podcast and here on Kings of Columbus. We appreciate you guys being part of it. Again, if you're watching on the YouTube feed, you, of course, can also listen on podcasts wherever you find them, Spotify, Apple. If you're listening on a podcast, thanks so much for doing that. You can also check out the YouTube channel for the podcast, and then you can see what we look like. I'm all sweaty. You can see what we look like as we talk. So we're trying to hit you guys wherever you are, and we're just grateful that you're part of it, and we hope you're partaking in a whole lot of the feed here at the podcast, because we're trying to give every type of Ohio State fan a bunch of different ways to enjoy the Buckeyes, to discuss the Buckeyes, to dive in, to dip in. Sometimes you want to dangle your feet in the pool, and you're like, I don't even want to put on a swimsuit. I want to dangle my feet. And sometimes you're like, I'm going to dive in and I'm going to swim for 4 hours. So we want to do all of that. And but we're not taking our shirts off. You're taking your shirt off?
No, I'm a shirt on in the pool kind of guy.
I'm a shirt on in the pool guy, and I convince myself because I don't want to get sunburned.
So have I.
But we know.
Not true.
We know the real reason. It's like, Doug, they have sunblock. It's like, no, I'm good. I have a water shirt. I also did tell my family officially that now that we're doing this show and like I'm on YouTube more, I said I'm going to get buff. Do you believe it? Yeah.
Yeah, I like to see it. Yeah.
Yeah. I've never been, so I'm curious what that experience would be like. But I also played pickleball the other night for an hour, and I can't move my legs 2 days later, so I'm not sure that's going to work. But they're building a pickleball country club near my house, so I'm super excited about that. So we'll be talking about that as that opens. For now, for Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises. Thanks to you guys for listening. That was the Kings of Columbus.